Today, we're diving into an ancient idea, one that asks a timeless and, let's be honest, a pretty uncomfortable question about what law even is. We're talking about natural law. It's this theory that suggests there's a higher, universal standard that all of our man-made laws have to answer to. So let's just get right into it. So let's just start with this question right here. Really think about it for a second. Can a law passed by a totally legitimate government still be fundamentally wrong? This single dilemma, well, it's the absolute beating heart of the natural law tradition. It forces us to look past the written rules and ask a much, much deeper question about justice itself. So, how does this school of thought answer that big question? Well, it says that for any law we create to be truly valid, it can't just be an order from a ruler. No, it has to line up with a universal moral code, something that's just woven into the fabric of nature itself, something that we can actually figure out just by using our reason. You could think of it as a moral litmus test for every single law. And this powerful Latin phrase, lex injusta non est lex, it sums up the entire philosophy in just 4 words. It's this radical, enduring claim that an unjust law isn't actually a law at all. It just lacks any real legitimacy or power to bind us. So, in this explainer, we're going to trace the biography of this incredible idea. We'll start with its ancient blueprint, see how it got organized into a kind of hierarchy, watch it transform into a tool for revolution, explore its modern revival, and then finally see why it's an idea that still matters so much today. This timeline gives us a fantastic bird's-eye view of the whole journey. You can really see how the concept changes over time, from the Greek search for a universal reason, what they called logos, to getting folded into this grand divine framework in the medieval period, then this dramatic pivot toward individual human rights, and finally, a really crucial revival after World War II, when people had to confront state-sponsored evil. All right, let's start at the very beginning, back in ancient Greece and Rome, where the first seeds of natural law were sown. What's so fascinating is how these early thinkers started to see 2 different kinds of law. They began to draw a line between their own man-made rules and what they felt was a universal sense of justice. Aristotle was huge here. He made this key distinction between natural justice, which he said was the same everywhere for everyone, and conventional justice, the local rules that changed from place to place. And this whole thing was built on the Greek idea of logos, a belief in this universal, cosmic reason that guided the entire universe. And the Roman orator Cicero just absolutely nails it with this quote. True law is right reason in agreement with nature. He's basically saying that real law isn't just something a ruler makes up. It's something we discover. It applies to everyone, everywhere, and it lasts forever. It's just a perfect summary of that classical view. Okay, let's jump forward to the next major chapter and see how this classical idea got absorbed and really organized during the medieval era. Now, the main character in this part of the story is St. Thomas Aquinas. He took the philosophical ideas of people like Aristotle and just masterfully wove them into Christian theology. What he created was the most comprehensive, most influential system of natural law the world had ever seen. And here's his system, broken down. Aquinas built this 4-level hierarchy of law. Right at the very top, you've got eternal law. Think of it as the mind of God, the blueprint for the universe. Just below that is natural law, which is our ability as rational humans to understand a little piece of that divine plan. Then you get human law, the laws our governments make, which, and this is the key part, must be based on natural law to be considered just. And finally, there's divine law, which is God's will as it's revealed in the scriptures. All right, now we're going to leap forward to a truly revolutionary shift. The focus is about to move from a divine order to the rights of the individual. This is where thinkers like John Locke completely change the game. They take natural law and make it less about God's grand plan and way more about us, about human beings. Locke argued that every single person is born with natural rights that exist before any government is even created. And he famously called them a rights to life, liberty, and property. And this way of thinking led directly to the powerful idea of the social contract. Look at the 2 sides of this deal. On one side, the entire purpose of the state is to protect our natural rights. That's its job. But on the other side, if the government breaks that contract, if it violates those rights, then the people have a natural right to resist it or even to overthrow it completely. You can see how this idea lit the fuse for the American and French revolutions. But this whole theory was about to face its greatest challenge yet in the 20th century, which led to a really profound moment of reckoning, and then a powerful revival. This is a stark, chilling, but absolutely crucial fact. The horrors committed by the Nazi regime weren't, in a strictly technical sense, lawless. They were carried out under laws that were passed properly, according to the German legal system at the time. And this created a massive moral crisis for legal thinkers everywhere. Which brings us right back to our central question. They were legal, sure, but were they just? The answer is a resounding, obvious no. This horrifying moment in history showed everyone the dangerous flaw in any legal theory that tries to completely separate law from morality. It forced the world to think, hey, maybe an unjust law really isn't a law after all. So, after the war, natural law had this major comeback. This revival was a direct pushback against the idea that law is just whatever the person in charge says it is. You had thinkers like Lon Fuller, who argued that any valid legal system has to have an inner morality. Its laws have to be public, clear, and consistent. And then there's John Finnis, who talked about universal basic goods, things like life, knowledge, even play, that any just legal system should always be trying to promote. The goal was crystal clear: to reconnect law and morality once and for all. So what does this ancient idea mean for us, right here and right now? Let's take a look at why natural law is still so incredibly relevant. The legacy of natural law is, well, it's all around us. It's the philosophical backbone for the entire idea of international human rights. The belief that you have rights just because you're human, not because a government decides to give them to you. It's the very justification used for civil disobedience by everyone from Gandhi to Martin Luther King Jr. And it's constantly pushing us to question the moral legitimacy of what our governments do, reminding us that the ultimate goal of any law should be justice for everybody. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. After we've traced this idea from ancient Greece all the way to the modern world, what does it mean for you? If a law passed by your government goes directly against your deepest moral convictions, what does this whole long tradition of natural law suggest is the right thing to do? It's a question that really shows just how powerful and how personal this ancient idea still is.